Thank you so much, Kelly. And it's great to be here with all of you. I have to confess, I struggled a bit with what to say to you this year. And oddly, I was reminded of this. It was the best of times. It was the worst of times. It was the age of wisdom. It was the age of foolishness. It was the season of light. It was the season of darkness. It was the spring of hope. It was the winter of despair. Does that classic opening from A Tale of Two Cities resonate for you? Dickens was writing about 18th century England and France, but for me it seemed a bit like 21st century United States, especially when we think about it from the perspective of breast cancer prevention and chemical exposure research. Gina told me just before that she's going to cut down on the moaning, but I'm not. So the worst of times was all over the front page of the New York Times last Sunday, and I hear it was on Colbert last night. Long-time experts, career experts, are leaving EPA. And industry scientists are moving in and hijacking the rules that are supposed to be there to protect us. And as an example of what this change means for us as we care about breast cancer, last year at the Gala, you celebrated the incredible breakthrough of the reform of the Toxic Substances Control Act. This was going to be the first chance in decades to get some health-based rules for common chemicals that we encounter every day. And in the last days of Gina McCarthy's EPA, agency scientists named 10 chemicals as priorities to consider under this law. 5 of them were linked to breast cancer. So again, we felt enormous hope that this was going to be a chance for real action on breast cancer prevention. But last summer, true to an age of foolishness, the rules that were announced to implement how these chemicals would be evaluated gutted the health assessments. But still, in the face of that kind of darkness, I see people in government all across the country in this room who are stepping up with new courage and leadership and committing to science as a way to ensure a safer future. And so that's a window onto the best of times. And an example of that, we have an example of that just recently as well. Last month, the Consumer Product Safety Commission voted to immediately warn the public about all organic halogen flame retardants and begin the process of banning them. Yeah, that's a big deal. It's a really important breakthrough because it's the first time a federal agency has ruled on a whole class of chemicals at once. And that means that industry won't be able to substitute new toxic chemical cousins when old ones are banned. So your latest victory at the Consumer Product Safety Commission provides a real opportunity to get the worst chemicals out of consumer products and off the market. Silent Springs scientist Catherine Rogers testified at the commission, working with lawyers from Earth Justice. She presented the scientific case for why the organohalogen flame retardant should be regulated altogether as a group. And the commission responded with this precedent-setting decision to prevent the short-sighted approach that had been going before. And I'd say that's a move towards the age of wisdom. It makes perfect sense to me. So together, we now have the opportunity to create new science and additional evidence to get toxics out of our lives. I want to tell you about 3 innovative strategies we're using to guide our research based on current discoveries about the nature of breast cancer. These are keys to prevention, and you can help us get answers faster to save more lives sooner. The first strategy is based on growing evidence that breast cancer develops from events that occur in windows of susceptibility throughout the life cycle, before birth, during puberty, through the first pregnancy, and at menopause. These are the times when the breast is changing. This year we completed a major review published in the journal Environmental Research that evaluated 158 epidemiological studies of environmental chemicals in breast cancer that have been published in the last 10 years. And the studies with the strongest research designs showed that early life exposures to air pollution and to DDT, which still lingers in our homes and in our bodies even though it was banned in 1972, and to some of those organohalogen chemicals that I mentioned before, those chemicals in the strongest studies are linked to higher breast cancer risk. So those organohalogens are chemicals that not only are in flame retardants, but they're in other uses as well. And I know you can all say bisphenol A and phthalates now. So by the end of the evening, organohalogens are going to be a piece of cake too. But in the past 10 years of research on breast cancer and environmental chemicals in humans, we found very few studies of the newer chemicals in consumer products like BPA and phthalates. To study these newer chemicals, we're following a group of teenage girls in Santiago, Chile, working with our collaborators at UCLA, University of Chile, and Fox Chase Cancer Center. We're investigating how hormone-disrupting chemicals in everyday life may affect the development of the breast in ways that contribute to higher breast density, which is a risk factor for breast cancer. And combining research with outreach, as we always do, Silent Springs' Dr. Jenny O'Hayan is also working with the girls in Chile and with breast cancer activists all around the country to share what we know now about how to choose safer products. When we get the answers about what is influencing breast density, we can prevent breast cancer decades in advance. So this has enormous potential to really advance how we can act on breast cancer years before it develops. The second strategy builds on the concept that cancer is not a disease of a single cell, but rather a collection of cells organized into tissues. Dr. Sid Mukherjee, who spoke at the Gala the year before last, published an article about this in the New Yorker recently where he used the metaphor of seed and soil. So cancer scientists used to just think about the seed, which is the cancer cell. And now we understand that we need to think about the context of the tissue surrounding that cell, which is the soil, and influences how a cancer may become invasive or metastatic. What is the progression of what happens to that cancer cell in the context of the tissue that surrounds it? To see if chemicals are safe, that means we want to learn what the chemical does to those normal cells, not just the cancer cells. So to find out, Silent Springs' Dr. Vanessa De La Rosa is heading next week out to the Berkeley National Lab to do the first chemical tests on breast organoids. So don't glaze over about the organoids. They're cool. Our collaborator at the Berkeley Lab has taken normal human breast tissue and is using stem cells from those samples to grow normal breast cells in a dish. And those normal cells cluster together into what we call organoids. And they act more like normal breast tissue than the models that have been used before. So the organoids are part of the soil in which the cell transformation creating a cancer seed might occur. Vanessa's tests are going to use BC Screen, breast cancer screen, the high throughput technology that you helped us develop to rapidly identify chemicals that increase breast cancer risk. And when this method is fully developed, it's truly going to be a game changer because it will make it practical and affordable to evaluate thousands of chemicals specifically for their likelihood to cause breast cancer. These tests can tell us in advance which chemicals are safer to put into products, and they could become part of EPA's standard test requirements. The third strategy is engaging everyone, including you, to help track exposures to harmful chemicals in people through Detox Me Action Kit. It's a crowdsourced, crowd-funded study, and I thank you, everyone in the room who peed for science. Your first results showed that our circle of friends has lower levels of these chemicals than most Americans because you've already made some important changes in your life. But these first results also helped us see the hidden chemicals that are hard to avoid. And they showed us that companies are replacing BPA with equally worrisome chemicals like BPS and BPF. And this is a story that's been repeating over and over. You know, you've heard me talk in the past about flame retardants and the Consumer Product Safety Commission about the organohalogen flame retardants. I should mention is a direct result of the science that you funded. We first, with your support, demonstrated that there were high exposures to flame retardants in the US, both in Massachusetts and then higher still in California. And our own Dr. Robin Dodson showed how industry was substituting newer toxics when old ones were banned. And your support for this research then made it possible to influence the flammability standards in California and in Massachusetts to change them so that we can now buy, all of us consumers and institutions like colleges and hospitals can now buy furniture that's flame retardant free. So we can see from this science, yes, I'm applauding that. That was a real breakthrough for us, and I remember our chair, Cynthia Barakat, went to the store right after the flammability standards were changed, and sure enough, there was a new kinds of couches here in Massachusetts as well as across the country. And that's showing that with this science we can stop those substitutions, because Catherine's testimony and our affidavit and our alliance with Earth Justice to change the Consumer Product Safety Commission ruling for all those organohalogens is an example of how when we document this kind of toxic substitution, we can get action to change that. So all of this is tremendously exciting and innovative science with the potential to save countless lives, and it can't happen without you. And I know many of you, like me, are drawn to Silent Spring by a personal sense of urgency about cancer. The theme of this year's gala about generations calls up a story about earlier generations in my own family. My grandfather, Bill Ellis, was an entomologist, a bug scientist, and a naturalist. As a young man, he moved to Concord, Mass. to tackle the corn borer, which was devastating New England farms. My Uncle Bill and my mom were born, and then my granddad founded his own company to formulate pesticides, and my Aunt Julia was born. When I was a kid, my granddad used to take us out in the fields all around Concord with butterfly nets, and we mostly left the butterflies alone, but we were out there gathering beetles and moths because those were his real interests. And he told us their Latin names and how they were divided into families. And we didn't really think yet about the possibility that the pesticides he formulated for the farms might have spillover effects on the whole ecosystem, including us. And we didn't think yet about the possibility that his work might be connected to Julia, his third child, getting sick. My Aunt Julia for whom I'm named, died of cancer before she finished first grade. So tonight you have the opportunity to generate the science and advocacy we need to stop making bad mistakes like that over again by putting untested chemicals into our environment. To choose Dickens' spring of hope over the winter of despair. To fund prevention for the generations to come. To support innovative research that's not happening anywhere but Silent Spring Institute. Thank you so much.